Okay. Yeah, okay. Hello, everyone. So, good evening to all. So, I would first like to thank Varna and Design United for basically giving me this platform to show some of my work today. And I would just be taking you through some of my work before my master's, during it, and a couple of them post that in a brief way. But yeah, so the first one I would like to talk about is the pod. Pod is an experimental project that was developed together with BL Manjunath while I was learning structures under him. It's a small living plug-in to an existing office building built in Bangalore. The idea was to explore how a very small living module could respond to urban density in a more sustainable and adaptable way. It was interesting to create something that could attach onto an existing building very lightly, almost as an extension of an existing fabric rather than a completely separate intervention. The project also began to question its own potential for adaptation and growth through its modular nature, which is reflected in some of the iterations explored here. The pod was an overall size of 3 by 2 meters, organized into 1 by 1 meter bays. Even within the compact footprint, it was able to accommodate the essential functions of living, sleeping, a pantry, and a toilet. The design is made up of two parts, an anchored structure and a cantilevered portion. The entire system follows a kit of parts logic, making it easier to fabricate, assemble, and adapt. These are some of the photographs of the project itself. The next project is my master's thesis at the AA in Emerging Technologies program, developed with two of my cohorts. Varanasi's religion and cultural importance attracts a massive floating population of tourists and pilgrims throughout the year, with peak pressure during the festival and pilgrimage seasons. This continuous influx has created a serious urban stress on the city, especially in terms of overcrowding, pressure on infrastructure, lack of temporary accommodation, congestion in markets and public spaces, and increasing densification within an already compact urban fabric. The climate is predominantly hot and humid, with annual temperatures generally ranging between 32 and 38 degrees Celsius. High humid levels of around 72 percentage is recorded. Since these programs are closely tied to the influx of floating users, the project investigates rest houses or dharamshalas and market typologies as key architectural responses to the city's floating population. Following the analysis of different areas, Zone 2 was identified after the KVCP project. If you guys are aware of it, was like basically the redevelopment project of Kashi Vishwanath Temple corridor, which was basically in Zone 1. And the next identified site that we proposed was basically the next zone, which the government already has a plan to redevelop. And this was taken as a case scenario for the project. The project used betweenness centrality, closeness centrality, reach, and gravity analysis to understand how movement, access, and urban opportunity are distributed across the zone. These studies help position different programs based on their relationships to wider city, making the urban strategy analytical and data driven rather than intuitive. The results were then overlapped to narrow down the potential site area. Within this reduced zone, further studies of building density, height variation, solar radiation, and visibility helped refine the search, while CFD, which is wind flow analysis or computational fluid dynamics, was used as the final step in selecting the site in response to the region's extreme climate. The final shortlisted rest house sites were then used as input data to identify the most suitable locations for market sites using machine learning and algorithms of how it could generate new sites as overlaps between rest houses and dharamshalas. Uh, and markets. So basically, the network analysis was conducted, and the areas were color coded to represent the different performance levels of each sub parcel. The patches were then evaluated based on the overlap of these values, and one of the highest performing land parcels was selected as the final site. The design objectives for the rest houses were then established to evaluate proximity, open space availability, and uh, environmental performance. A multi-objective evolutionary experiment was carried out to optimize functional adjacencies, as illustrated here, with particular emphasis on open courtyards to encourage social interaction. And when we come to the experiential part, which is the markets itself, further design objectives for the markets focused on maximizing environmental performance and visibility while also ensuring enough space of future expansion and walkable market lanes. On the chosen site, one of the design parameters was created to create concavity in order to improve visibility and reduce congestion. The experiment also incorporated the existing data set of shops as part of the parameters for the design process. Uh, Considering the smallest shop scale as 2 by 2 meter grid, 2 by 2 meter grid was used, 2 by 2 meter grid was used as the base module for the design. The larger shop were placed first in order to accommodate their spatial requirements and ensure better visibility within the layout. This was then used as a basis for generating the shortest walking paths, which helped for market lanes and improved permeability at a more human scale. A recursive logic was then used to manage clashes and constraints during the placement of the remaining medium and small scale shops. An additional 20% area was introduced to the existing data set to allow for a more effective aggregation of shops at varied scales. The highlighted zones represent the cells identified for future expansion. The existing market functions were also rehabilitated as part of the intervention. The optimized solutions for each typology were generated through the algorithm or a part of the entire process of input parameters that were provided. In terms of the material, since the materials were readily available locally, the project explored loam and timber as the primary material system. The loam mix was developed using sand, silt, and clay, along with natural stabilizers such as lime, pozzolana, barley straw, and sugarcane bagasse. The highlighted samples were tested in compression, and mixes with barley straw and sugarcane bagasse performed best. These were then used to create rammed earth panels, which were tested for thermal performance and showed a temperature difference of around 1 degree Celsius. Based on this, the final composition selected for the panel production, like this was the final composition that we selected and went with, while glulam timber was used as a structural framework. The sequence, like the further simulations that we did over these for the rest houses, focused on developing a kit of parts system across multiple scales, from individual cells to structural composition, and further to facade components, including door panels, window panels, and a roof system. The same, there was a different kind of modulation system that was created to develop for more adaptability and future expandability for the market typology, which was basically in terms of how kinetic and like in the sense that how every surface can modulate itself to accommodate and adapt to new kinds of population, because it was a floating population throughout the year which would expand and contract, and we wanted to create some kind of a building which could do that. So basically there are some examples of how that would react in terms of a built typology. So this might be, like, this is just illustrated as an antique shop but could expand and contract when required. The same can be used for a medium scale restaurant, which is just the proportion which is changed, which can create a different spatial quality. This one is just another flower or a food shop, where it also accommodates a lot of hawkers, because if you could see the plans on the right corner, like the colored bits are the things that people have just come in as hawkers, whereas the permanent function is shown in gray, which would always exist throughout the season. So this is another example of one of the functions. Yeah, so this one shows the layout of a basic shop unit. The design is kept flexible so it can accommodate different types of activities and changing patterns of use around it. This was the overall achieved catalog for the rest houses and the market typology. And then, yeah, so this is just a small visualization of the markets of how it could modulate over the seasons and things like that. And this is the rest houses as how it starts building and expanding, because a lot of the blocks are kept empty with just the frames in it, but it could expand potentially because the walls, which are basically made of loam, were made as panels, so they could actually come off and get in. So it was just a framework where you attach and then start creating enclosures as and when it's required. So the next project is an installation project, a full-scale design build work developed by MTech students and the AA, funded and collaborated by the Experience Studio at Populous, which was built in Bedford Square in London. So there is this one kind of like they have this design and build kind of a scenario, which is there's a collaboration with AA every 2 years. So once a year they actually start ideating the project, and it continues to the second year where they actually make it. And usually it's done on the Bedford Square, which is right in front of the AA, just to give the context for what it's about and where it's built. So the pavilion was uses rattan as its primary material. So the process began with understanding its natural flexibility, bending limits, and structural behavior. The key challenge was how to transform a set of relatively unstable natural systems into a stable aggregated system. As a result, the project developed through a combination of material testing, computational analysis, physical prototyping, and hands-on fabrication. So just to give you a small glimpse of it, in the sense that everything was built by the students. So there was no external agency which basically helped to do it. So everything was done either robotically or using tools, or it was built by hand. Various 3D printed jigs were developed to twist different rattan bundle sizes. They helped control the arrangement and twisting process, making it easier to test geometry, bundle behavior, and fabrication accuracy. The bundles were twisted using a robotic arm, and a series of experiments were carried out to understand their breaking point in relation to the number of twists. So, the number of rotations was something that we calibrated over a period of time, because we saw where it would actually break, to understand which is the maximum it can take, because every bundle had a different breaking point. So in the previous slide, if you observe, there were bundles of 7, 28, and 35. So it's basically 7 bundles which were basically repeated as a multiple. So 7 was a constant, but it just added it and then it twisted. So first the 7 gets twisted, and then you add it to make it like add 4 bundles of 7, which is twisted and twisted more. So it gives you more like it becomes more plastic, because the number of rattans increase as a bundle, and also increases the stiffness of the material or the bundle itself compared to a single element of rattan. So at the same time, using the results from the bending tests and recorded material properties, a series of digital simulations were carried out to study both the bending behavior and the aggregation logic of the system. So all of these were simulations which directly had the properties which we explored and understood by analyzing the entire material, and input that into like a physics based model where it actually starts generating with fixity points and understand where is the rigidity and how it manipulates itself to find the point at which it becomes stable when it gets aggregated. This is the overall assembly logic of the pavilion, from the individual bent members to the aggregated structural unit. Since the installation was designed as a temporary pavilion, it did not rely on a permanent substructure. Instead, each unit was anchored through a resin printed base filled with sand, which acted as a counterweight and provided stability without fixing the system permanently to the ground. This made the pavilion both lightweight and reversible, in line with the temporary nature of the installation. So these are some of the photos when once it was built. So it was like a very small pavilion, but yeah, like it is quite hard to execute because each one, because it's through bending. So as you start fixing until the entire aggregation is not together, it would always move. So it's not stable unless everything is fixed. Yeah. The next and the final project that I would want to talk about is Thicket, a design competition proposal for a timber furniture pavilion hosted by DigiFab. It was developed collaboratively with two of my friends, one of whom is Lakshay, who is presenting here today. Uh, the brief asked for a design that brings together the personal and the public, something that works like architecture in space and furniture in use. It also had to be made entirely in timber, CNC fabricated, self-supporting and suitable for public use. The idea behind the design began with a simple question: how can a public space also feel personal? One of the main interventions of the proposal was to create a space where people could pause, observe, sit alone, or casually connect with others. The pavilion was imagined as a continuation of the outside to the inside, expressed through a single continuous element that shapes two contrasting spatial conditions. Building on that concept, the project was then developed through a refined assembly logic. The pavilion was conceived as a self-supporting kit of parts made from repeated timber members of a single size of 25 by 25 mm. Uh, Plywood seating components were also a part of this to also get rigidity once the entire aggregation is put, as basically bracing at a lower level, which is because the seating is at a particular height. So fabricated entirely in timber, fabricated entirely in timber through 5-axis CNC routing. Each element was computationally defined and prepared for accurate production and assembly. This allowed the geometry to be carefully controlled and the variation between members to be efficiently organized while keeping the overall construction system clear and buildable. The overall system follows the logic of a single repeated element organized along a defined geometry to achieve stability. It was also an opportunity to explore computational thinking and digital fabrication can support precision while opening up new ways of visualizing and building. Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Hello everyone. Thank you for joining today. Thank you Vijay and Varna for inviting me here. It feels full circle to be back in Bangalore. And yeah, so I'll be speaking about my time at Hook Park, the time where I sort of spent prototyping, making, breaking a lot of objects. The presentation is sort of split into three parts. I'll sort of be giving a sense of context of where this place is located, why it sort of exists, the kind of making we did there, and there's a film about the last prototype that was sort of left behind. Just to touch on this, I'm Lakshay again, and I'm from this place called Gandhidham. It's in Kutch, and I have a sawmill. And I think after sort of working in Bangalore for a few years, the idea was, how do you really engage with this sawmill that you have sort of inherited? And the idea was that you sort of go to this course which will give you this grounding before you start your practice. And of course, I can't start talking about Hook Park before talking about the people who were there. I was mostly not taught by architects in that course. We had people who had worked on boats who were sailors by profession. We had structural engineers. We had people who were foresters. We had one architect who didn't pursue architecture and wanted to sort of make sculptures in the forest, which was our director. And we had filmmakers sort of like telling us about like the importance of photography and filmmaking. Also, I was surrounded by 16 people who, out of which 4 were Indians, but then we also had people from China, from Taiwan, from Panama, Indonesia, Germany, and I think all of them sort of brought the course together, and we sort of grew together. And just to now bring you to Hook Park, it's on the southern end of UK. It's four hours away from London, and it's sort of this patch forest. What I mean by that is, At some point, UK sort of ran out of the forests in the entire country because they had used all of it for the war. And then they replanted sort of these forests. And they were man-made forests, and the problem was because they were only in these sort of patches, it meant like the animals can't migrate, they were not resilient against diseases, they were sort of difficult to look after. Whenever a rain or a strong wind will sort of come, trees will fall down. And so there was a sort of 100-year plan that the school is working on, and the Forestry Commission is involved in it, and you got to sort of know about it a little bit more. Hook Park is also not a special forest. It's like a general forest. That means anything that works in Hook Park would sort of work in all the forests in UK. And we sort of come to 1982, where this gentleman, John Makepeace, decides to start a furniture school there. And he is instrumental in bringing sort of Frey Auto on board along with ABK to do these two buildings. With the brief that can we do something with all the timber which is otherwise of no commercial value. So these are really thin members, and you can't convert the round timber to sort of dimensional because you would have almost no cross section left. But I think that sort of started this sort of chain reaction of thought of how do we work with timber which is of no value. So just to come back to it, when we say timber, we generally think of dimensional timber, which is of certain standard sizes. And on the left is this sort of tree of like how we would generally see it. And we are only using the stem wood. Anything that's above the stem wood, below the stem wood is otherwise ignored. And so the framework came that how do you really make anything with that? And this is not a new thought, it has sort of existed. This is a drawing from 16th century which a shipbuilder made. And so he was very aware about all the components that can come out of these corners and would turn into bracing members. And I think since 2010, Design and Make has sort of re-engaged with this conversation. How do we sort of re-look at timber and re-look at fabrication? So every year a cohort is given like a building that they are sort of supposed to prototype and build. And in that you sort of learn. And I think I was lucky because when I was there, there was the batch before me and the batch before that were also sort of doing a building. So you were sort of parallelly working with all of them. And yeah, that's what, if you were to visit us in the campus, we would be doing this. We would be mostly making something, sometimes small, sometimes big. And so this is the tree and the truss, and we were sort of helping them fabricate because this project is currently live. And then in all that making, I think when we had joined the course, we were really amateurs in terms of making. We hadn't really, I think, picked up a saw also to make anything. And so the first exercise was really to make this toilet block, which is a facility needed in the campus. And so in the process of you sort of making that, you sort of learned a lot about how to work with timber. And of course, this was the first building we had built, so we were very proud of it because Emmanuel had sort of pointed out that architects design, but they never build anything. And so this was the first building that we were building. But slowly, I think the research questions sort of start coming in, like anything that you were doing was surrounded around this question. So for me, the idea came, how do you really work with any of the pruned components? So through high pruning, to maintain a forest and so that the sun sort of reaches to the ground, you want to prune the forest every few years. So what can one do with that material? And this was us sort of like just procuring all of that material, and we understood only by, I think, cutting the section through the timber why it was really strong. But that curiosity was sort of still unanswered, so we started investigating it more because we also realized while working with our seniors that the timber sort of shrinks and changes, and can we sort of really know when the moisture content is right so that we can work with it. But also can we break it and just figure out how strong they really are. So then we realized that 20 mm sort of die of fork, 20 to 30 mm would be easily able to hold around 800 kgs on its own, and once you start using it in a system, it's a really powerful component to play with. And this was us sort of seniors who had sort of started this conversation of figuring out how to make a space frame with these sort of pruned components. But the smartness was really in the jig. So I think earlier, if you look at the work that was done, I think maybe 3 years ago, it was very centered around the robot. And our cohort felt more that we were maybe from the global south. So we need to figure out how to work with the community. And yes, digital tools are important, but can we put all of that intelligence in the jig, and then it can be a person who has never worked with timber but can still make all the pieces. So what you had done here was you created this bounding box, so it can be a really wild geometry, but it would sort of fit into this box, and then is a sort of unit that can repeat and form this. So that was something our seniors were working on, and we sort of helped them fabricate this component, and it was done, I think, in Jan of 2025. And then you started playing with your own iteration of datum, because you started critiquing it, you started playing with its other configurations, and you were very aware that all of these prototypes that you're making, they can have an afterlife. So we had this, our workshop manager, Charlie, he had like these wonderful grandkids, so it became the table for them later on. But then we were introduced to the site that we were asked to engage in, and so it's sort of the new front for Hook Park, because currently if you arrive, it feels like an army base, you don't know where to go next. And so this building sort of is the reception, there's a small library, maybe a bookshop, and 3 studios. So we were asked to imagine what those 3 rooms might be like, but because a part of building was already built, you were also asked to imagine what happens in the space between. And so that's when we had joined, these sort of components were being installed, and that's what we were asked to imagine, what happens underneath that tree and truss. And so we started iterating through our sketchbooks, through digital means, and we were also asked to think about this sort of thicket. So the idea was we were split into groups of 3, and then each person will sort of pick a component, then they will sort of start detailing out. So the wall is someone's project, the roof is someone's project, the sliding door is someone's project. But then we negotiate with each other, and that, I think, made it richer. And yeah, so that was the primary room in the middle that we sort of engaged in sort of the most. And then there was this sort of jewel box of folks that was imagined that will sort of wrap this hall. So it can move between this sort of indoor condition by enclosing these 2 large sliding panels, but it can feel like a veranda on the other days. And so that was some of the sketches we had done during that term, and some quick sketches of like what this might feel like, look like. And there was this idea of this sort of captain's wheel, that you can move that around and this whole door sort of slides away. And then some quick models. So the walls were imagined in mycelium. This sort of folk wall, which was basically a vertical space frame, was imagined, which also became sort of the way of accessing the roof, which is what one of the other groupmates wanted to sort of do, to go up and occupy that space which was otherwise never inhabited, and read a book there. And then there were many models that were made. They were all documented in sort of this sort of sketchbook that we had, and you sort of kept playing. So every time you'll make a prototype, or you will try and draw a prototype, you will struggle, and our director would tell us, it's okay, just make it, you'll know at least 20% of it. And so on that 20, then you can sort of move forward and like develop it further. And then in sort of the project review, we presented a set of like curious objects, which were all these sort of prototypes that seem very obscure, but we had a fun time sort of building this. But then people were also really critical about these things, and then we sort of came back to our projects, and then we started playing with it. So for our last prototype, we were looking at this sort of like a proof of concept of this sort of door, which was maybe a couple of slides back. That door there, so that would be the door for Hook Park, which is sort of an over-engineered door, but it was sort of testing out this other idea of this vertical space frame. And so that was the kit of parts that took a really long time to sort of fabricate, and a lot of testing and a lot of failures have happened on the way. And that's what I think you were really thinking while you were making it, and that was something that you sort of enjoyed doing. But that's what we were also critiquing on sort of our seniors project, where all the timber, because it was essentially all sapwood, were eaten by bugs. So how do you really protect it? So you realized maybe you can burn it, you know, and that would sort of help it. And then it's still a proof of, like, I mean, it was still an attempt. We still don't know if it works. Now that the project exists and it's in the outside, maybe we'll know in a year or so if it has worked well. And then every time you'll go and have a conversation with someone about what's the right paint color, a very different question will sort of come back to you. That do you really need to paint? And then you will try and figure out how to do that. And so we played with sandblasters, and we realized we can just do a WD-40 and then you really don't need to paint steel. And then because it was a prototype, we thought of this sort of poetic license that we carried, and it was through the sort of photos that we tried to capture like what the sort of poetic object was. And so I'll just sort of flip through them. And yeah. And so that's, I think, where sort of the project ended for me. On the left is sort of the prototype I have built, and on the right is sort of the prototype that is currently being developed by the new cohort. I mean, it at least started that conversation, but the point was that there are still so many folks that we are not addressing. What happens to the little larger folks? What happened to the little shorter folk? And can we sort of move away from this sort of structural diagram, knowing that this prototype works well? And with that, there's the film which is in the media player. No, it's not this one. I see. This one, right? Full screen. That's nice. Is it not? It is.
So the presentation, the presentation today has two sides to it. First of all, is it okay if I sit? Yeah. Has two sides to it. First of all, I'll give you a very brief context about our little practice and where we practice and what we have gone through in the past few years. And the second part of the presentation is mostly about our approach to design, how we would approach a design, and I will take you all through one of the projects that we completed. It's our own house. We will have some pictures, and then essentially we'll explain how the entire design was uh, done and then completed. And finally, something that we are hoping to, a project that is proposed and being, being implemented at the moment. So let me just start with, okay, so in it's a little bit about the history. In 2003, I started architecture studies. Had absolutely no idea what architecture was back then. And 2004, I had my first internship at Mr. C. Anjalendran's practice. And then 2005, I joined Architecture Iron, and I'm up to date, working there. In 2012, I got my license, and in 2016, started doing my own little projects. And by about 2018, we were getting slightly established. We were getting, consistent inquiries, and things were kind of picking up. And then in 2019 onwards, there were a few hard years. In 2019, we had this terrorist attack, and then overnight, the tourism sector sort of, uh, just almost shut down, I would say. And then a lot of investments were pulled out of the country. In 2020, we had COVID, and then the economic crisis, months of lockdown, shortage of labor, delays in, in approvals and so on. So, uh, the industry was going through a bit of a hard time. 2022 was, these mass protests that we had, that again, added to this economic crisis. A lot of, problems with importation, and the inflation rates going up, a fuel shortage, and it still keeps happening. Even last year, 2025, we had this very massive, cyclone. It's very probably the worst cyclone in during my lifetime. And then it's still, 2026, with the Middle East, crisis now. Again, we are, looking at fuel shortages, and uh, it's a bit of a challenging time for anyone who has got established in, say, after 2018, 2019. It was a very challenging time. But we have been working. We have been, doing. Uh, Surviving and then doing interesting stuff through this entire time period. I'll just show you a few projects that we managed to complete during this time, and I would like you to just notice that, red figure right at the bottom, just to give you an understanding of where we have gone from, from 2022. So this is a house I completed in 2022. It's about a 4,500 square foot house, two-story house, that, the approximate cost was about 1,800 INR. And then the second project was in 2023 April. Again, very similar scale, a little bigger than the earlier one, but this was ground plus two. The approximate cost now had, gone to about 3,840, so it's almost doubled, right? And something that we finished very recently in 2025 November, uh, much small in scale. It's a single story house into only 2,500 square feet, but still, the value has gone up to about 5,170. And the last project is actually an ongoing project. The first three images are just renders, and a site image, of course. Now, you know it's again a very similar scale project. It's about 4,800 square feet and ground plus one. Now it's at 7,090. So we are talking about at least four times the cost escalation from 2022. So this is essentially what we're dealing with, right? A lot of projects have been suspended, and some clients have pulled out. but we're still, we are, we are islanders. We are islanders full of, I would say, goldfish memory. So we forget very quickly, and we're quite hopeful, and then we are still working. A lot of interesting projects are coming up in Colombo by so many different architects. Uh, so just to tell you a little bit about how we approach a design. I'll share some thoughts. Some these are not laws or theories or anything like that. It's just things that we generally follow, try to follow at least. We might not be able to incorporate all of these aspects into all of the projects, but some certain guidelines that we follow in our own little practice. So a few things. Sustainability for us is probably one of the most important things that we would use to establish a design project. When I say sustainability, is not only about environmental sustainability. It's about being able to afford a building, being able to maintain a building, and then the durability of the project and so on. And the second one, I mean, I believe and we believe that a tree is something that is definitely much more beautiful than anything that we can produce. So we try to incorporate trees, like increase the biomass as much as possible in our projects, and also try to retain any trees that we have. We would very rarely cut any trees in our projects. If we have to, I mean, of course, we certain instances we have to, but we would try to somehow use as much as possible. And natural light and ventilation, again, are very important things to us. We would try to use as much of these elements as possible. Security and privacy, again, very important. The two of us, I mean, are quite private people. So for us, naturally it comes, the moment we get a site, the first thing we do is, try and create that, sense of security and privacy, right? The proportion, again, a very important factor. Scale, the size of a building and a proportion of a building on a site, and what it relates to around a site. And we definitely belong to this school of thought where we like to carve out spaces as opposed to build objects. Maybe we don't know how to build pretty objects. We try to create these sort of pathways that explore spaces rather than actual objects. Uh, we believe in the use of textures and materials are very important to us. We use them as tools to create this connection between the internal and outdoor spaces a lot. Again, architectural design, landscape design, and interior design is definitely, to us, is just a part of one integral exercises. You just can't detach those from each other. That's what we believe. And personalizing projects, again, a very important thing to us. We don't try to project our own preconceived architectural narrative on clients. We try to somehow work with them as much as possible. Because of that, I would say about 50% of our projects are not photographable. You can't really take very good photographs. And then art and furniture, again, plays a adding to that same point. Art and furniture, any collection that anyone has, right? Everyone has some sort of collection, becomes a big part of a house. And we definitely believe that a little bit of a certain level of imperfections are they add character to a space while making a project a little bit more human. We're not so worried about perfection. It's always nice to have a just chipped off column here and there, and then a split timber. It makes it a little bit more real. So just to show you all one project where we try to adopt as many of these as possible. I'll just take you all through the design of our house. So this is, can you see the cursor? Yeah. This is the plot we got. It's about 4,000 square foot, almost a square plot, and these were the existing trees we had. We had a lovely olive tree here, another olive tree which was actually our neighbors, but there was a beautiful branch coming into our property, so we wanted to use that. And then there was a jack, and then some wild trees here. There was another tree here. This was the only tree that we had to remove because it was on the boundary. But in fact, we wanted to incorporate that as well. If you look at our foundation, the foundation actually go around it. But we had to remove it because the power lines were going on top of it. So, there was the power company coming and eternally chopping the top off, right? So the first thing we did, being the introverts we are, uh, created a bit of a mini fort around the property. This a little recess was to create an entrance and to create a car park. So this gave these are about 4 meter high walls, I would say. So a lot of privacy and a lot of a good sense of security inside the property. And then what we did was we started adding the functional spaces to it, making sure that we retain the existing trees. So this was the entrance, and then you had 4 functional blocks, which were more or less solid blocks, and then connected those solid blocks with almost pavilion-like, veranda-like colonnaded spaces. So that is pretty much how we approach the design, a very practical, I would say, a way to somehow retain the trees and add more trees along the way. So this is essentially the final, the layout of the house. I'll just quickly take you through the layout. This is where we park, and you have the main entrance here. As soon as you enter, you see the entire, main courtyard. And when you turn right and go along this courtyard, we come across the living and the studio. So we have a living and a studio because we live a little away from Colombo, and no one really, very rarely have visitors. So we didn't see the point of having a formal living and a separate studio. So we, have a living studio sort of combined space. And when you go along this corridor, you come to our main bedroom, which is probably the biggest, portion, like a block in the entire design, where we have our bedroom, the closets, and the bathroom, and so on. We have our own private courtyard with a little pond here. And if you turn left from the main door, we come across the kitchen and then the dining pavilion. The dining is in between 2 gardens, and that leads you to a guest bedroom and another bathroom here, ending with a little sitting area that connects to the rear side on that side. And the kitchen is, again, kitchen has a service courtyard that connects to the outside through a service access here. So I'll show you a few um, images of the house. I just want to show you, this is what it looked like during construction. So this, if you look at this dot over here, the red dot, I've just taken the picture from here. So this is just before completion, and this is what it looks like now. You can't really see a house. It's really a facadeless thing. This is what why we keep adding trees, right? And so that is a picture taken from here at the entrance courtyard. This is where I normally park my car, but I've just taken the car out for this shot. So as we've used a lot of stone paving. There's stone on the ground, and there are some lovely old stone, reclaimed stone steps that lead you to the main door. The door is an old door that was again a gift from a very dear client of ours. And so it's just, all you see is, as you enter the main courtyard, another view of the entrance. Just quickly run through. So as you enter, this is what you see. Now, this is the main courtyard. And what you see here is actually the largest part of the house, the master bedroom block. And throughout the years, we have been trying to make that line as soft as possible by trying to add a little ferns and then the bird's nest here so that that line gets merged slightly. We added the Kohila pond here so that that gets slightly merged. So it's really a matter of composing your views using a little bit of landscape here and there. We are not landscape architects. We just keep trying things in our garden so that it becomes more pleasing for us. And so this is as you enter, and then uh, as soon as you turn right, now you're moving a little towards the living room, and you start seeing the house, so a little bit of the rest of the house. You start seeing all the artwork, and in a way, the house is really built for the artwork. I would say, it's either it could be man-made or the natural, because to me this is all art. It's a sculpture, and the house is very. We haven't painted our walls. We have kept it very bare, very very minimal, so that it highlights the artwork much more, so that the building is almost receding to the background. It's not really uh, competing with the collection. So we are at the moment here, and then we turn right more towards the living space. Now this is our living pavilion. That is pretty much what the living room is, living and the studio is. Here we have actually introduced a skylight, so that it brings this really beautiful beam of light during midday, and it lights this little bit of greenery that we always have here, that connects with the garden as well when you're inside. Another view of the living, well, I would say this is the studio side of the living room, if you think about it, and then this is the living room side of the living room, right? So it's just where we usually, the two of us usually be hanging out the whole day. If I'm working, she'll be here. If she's working, I'll be here. So it's usually how our days move on. And then this is just we're coming out of the living room. As you can see, it's very closely connected to the courtyard. It's pretty much a, a big part of the garden. I would say the garden is the bigger element of the house than anything else. Now we are moving towards the bedroom. This is a corridor, a long corridor that goes along this courtyard. And what you see here is the courtyard behind, our bedroom courtyard. And looking back again at the living room, just a connection between, because of this light, I would say, this because of this light and how it lights the greenery, it has a really nice connection with the courtyard here. And as soon as you enter our bedroom, you have our courtyard and this beautiful Ina di Silla batik on the right hand side, and a few more views of you know so again, I mean, I was at IIM today. It's just amazing place, and even there, everywhere you turn, you see another courtyard. It's amazing space. So here we just try to create as much courtyard as possible, and to give as many visual links as possible everywhere. Uh, Again, on the other side, another view of the bedroom. So this is a view of the bathroom. Now, so if you don't see the faucet and the bathtub, I mean, this can is essentially another part of the room. So we belong to the school of thought where we treat bathrooms as an extension of the room. They are never, we don't want to make bathrooms look different to our rooms. In the sense, we won't have tiles going all the way to the top, right? We try to hide the tiles as much as possible. And so this is that sitting area that I was talking about behind. This is actually an exit to the rear property. We've acquired that little property behind as well. So that's just a garden space at the moment. So here, it's a lovely place to sit and wait, because this is east and this is west. So the morning sun filters through this garden, and then when you sit here and look at the garden behind, it looks really nice in the morning. I'll just show you some pictures. So I'm turning, and then this is this little raised courtyard over here. This courtyard was raised so that these rooms would be more private, because these rooms get ventilation from this courtyard. And so this is that view. When you are sitting on that white bench, this is what you see early morning because of the green being lit from that side. View of our guest bedroom and that bathroom. Again, if you don't have this, if you cover this faucet, you probably wouldn't know that this is a bathroom. And some more views of the corridors. This is our living, so the dining pavilion. So this is in between two courtyards. This is our dining space, and then there's another courtyard behind as well, another view of the dining space. And so this is the dining with the two courtyards on either side. Another image, just an image of the kitchen, and then this is that service entrance. This door over here. So essentially, that I've just taken you all through the entire house through the visuals, and that's the two of us call it home, and we share the house with these fellows, right? We have six, and six away. They pretty much are a big part of the house, I would say. This is Chandi. He's more of a guard dog than a cat. The philosopher. He's always thinking. This one has a lot of attitude, and dangles up a Hodi is a darling, and so they're a big part of the house as well. I don't think I honestly, we can't imagine the house without them. Apart from them, because of the sort of landscape we have done, and because of because we just keep it very wild, we have so many visitors. A lot of mammals, obviously. We have monkeys, mongoose, polecats, porcupines, all sorts of things. Also, a lot of migrating birds. Now, we have the regular birds, like that they hang around throughout the year. Apart from that, we have a lot of migrating birds as well, and a lot of butterflies, a few rare ones as well, a lot of beautiful moths, and a lot of insects that we've never seen anywhere before, right? These weird clusters of insects, bugs, and beetles, a lot of various types of caterpillars and worms, spiders. Uh, yeah, so we have frogs, a lot of frogs. In fact, I think we were talking about it once before. We don't have a major mosquito problem, and I think the reason is frogs, because we have a lot of frogs, and in the evening, it's very loud. It gets very loud because of the frogs. We don't mind it, and yeah, so we have lizards coming, and also we are blessed with a few snakes coming on and off. We've mostly non-venomous snakes. We've only had one venomous fellow that we caught and then somehow released. And this curious guy, do you all know who this is? And it looks like an earthworm, but it's actually a snake. It's called a blind snake. It's the smallest snake species in Sri Lanka. I know, probably in the world. So she had spotted three. My eyesight is not that good, so she has spotted three of them in our garden. So we, share the house with these guys and a lot more. I mean, I can't show all these pictures, right? And a whole load of plants, I again can't show pictures of all of them. From about 30, 40 foot trees to the undergrowth. These are some medicinal plants that we have in the undergrowth. These are all medicinal plants. So the house to us is the built element is just an envelope. The house to us is really about the collection we have, and all the animals that we share it with, and definitely all the plants we have been collecting for the past 4 years. Uh, yeah, so that's really about the house. And then just one more project to show what we are, something that we're proposing hoping to build in the next couple of years. It's a villa project in Vellavai, a little away from Colombo. Again, a beautiful property with a water stream going in the middle with two mountains on either side. So again, here the main idea is to retain every single tree without cutting a single tree. We'll see if it's possible, but that's the whole the idea. Yeah. So
In 2024, I had the good fortune of being part of the Glen Market Masterclass. And um, it's lovely to be here and moderate this session today. Sheryl will just introduce herself as well. She's co-moderating this one.
Hi everyone, I'm Sheryl Christy and I'm a final year student from Christ University. It's a privilege to be part of everything which is happening here, especially as part of Design United. It's a big opportunity for me to interact with these great architects, and I'd like to know a lot more as we dive into our session. And Aditi will start off with the first question.
Um, David Robson has authored a definitive book on the work of Jeffrey Bauer, where he has an essay where he begins with a quote by Alexander Pope, which I'll now share with you. It says, "Consult the genius of the place in all, that tells the waters or to rise or to fall." And I think that's such an incredible sensibility. And it definitely reflects in Bawa's work. And after everything that you shared today and your ideas of, carving out space and blurring the edges of the buildings, yours really seem to give themselves back to the surroundings as well. And I know you touched upon the fact that you've been influenced by Bawa and with your work with Anjalendran, but I'm very fascinated to know of everyone's origins in architecture. So it would be great if you could tell us a little bit more about how you came to practice in the format that you do and what your influences were. And then maybe both of you could also share your origins in architecture and what influenced you in the way that you have gone about pursuing practice. Yeah.
okay, difficult. So, like I said, in 2003, I think, so after school, when I started architecture, I had absolutely no idea what it was. I had only seen the Lunuganga book because my sister read it. Absolutely loved it, but had absolutely no idea what it was. In a sense, I still don't know what it really is, maybe. But I do come from I guess, a family of builders. So maybe that was, maybe the idea was to, I mean, my grandfather was a carpenter and then my uncles were builders. So there was a lot of, maybe that did definitely influence. I still like to build as opposed to design, I suppose, right? Uh, Influences in terms of, yes, definitely. I mean, every architecture student in Sri Lanka is influenced by Bava. There's no doubt about it. And then I had the opportunity of working for Mr. Anjalendran, so absolutely, influenced by his principles, his devotion to his work, his it's a more than, I mean, you join Anjalendran's practice in the soon after first year, so you don't really know architecture. So I don't think he really tries to teach you architecture. He tries to teach you a discipline, a way of thinking, a way of focusing, more or less. But now after that, I joined Cheyenne practice, and I'm still there. I'm so honored. He offered me a partnership a few years ago, so I'm technically a partner there. But so I'm definitely influenced by both of them as well. More than anything, I mean, in terms of architects, but more than anything else, the both of us, we have a group of friends who are, who have this mutual interest in nature. So we do a lot of trekking, we do a lot of camping. In fact, I remember designing my house, in the middle of the Knuckles Range. We were we had gone on a camping trip, and it's honestly speaking, to me, it's nothing like spending a night inside the forest. It's very different.
That's when you consult with the genius of the place.
I do, maybe possibly, but just being inside the forest at night has a it's a different feeling altogether. You can't. It's very difficult to explain it if you haven't experienced it. I'm talking about an actual forest. You have to trek for about two days to get to like the middle of Knuckles, something like that. So maybe the influences in terms of being sensitive to nature came from that, I guess, because of our mutual interests. Uh, but I wish we had known more about landscape before we started doing our garden, because most of those plants you saw there, they don't belong there.
Are they not native?
Well, I have see because we love going into the rainforest. I had this idea of creating a little bit of rainforest for myself, which is really rather superficial, right? So what really happens is, to me, it feels like I'm keeping them on life support, almost. Because see, during the dry season, if you don't water them, they die. They die, right? You need to constantly keep watering them, which is, in my opinion, is not a very good way of landscaping. So if we had known that, but I was telling Varna as well, we are slowly in the process of correcting our garden, because now we kind of understand what's going on a little bit more. But yeah, there's a lot more to learn. Anything else you want?
What about the both of you? What are your origin stories for architecture, your influences? You said something about a sawmill and
Hmm.
having.
So, I think architecture really happened because my dad would shift around his houses quite a lot.
Okay.
Okay, and we would always imagine building this house for ourselves. That never happened, but he's like, uh, I think when he was drawing out those plans, not to scale and everything, he would get me to like sit next to him. And that's when this idea came that, oh, Lakshay can draw well, maybe he can be an architect. But I was from a small town, so I don't think I landed in a in a great architecture school. But then you discovered books, you discovered, I think, like a lot of my friends are here, they know, like I discovered the Doshi film, and that was like when you decided to really come back to Ahmedabad to see like a lot of his work, and you sort of registered what it meant to like experience good work. And then you went to Sri Lanka at some point, you came across Baba, that was important, and I think that's what sort of led to me coming to Varna also, because I thought there was like a shared tie, like a shared string there, so you can learn a little bit more about how Baba sort of did it through this landscape lens. And then I mean, Bijoy is here, and like there is like so much that you can sort of owe to him that you have learned. And of course, then I think travel has been sort of the sort of way of seeing, I guess.
We were talking about earlier about influences from within the South Asia sort of region and how heavily Indians are influenced by Bawa, and we were wondering if that was conversely true for you guys, which was refreshing. Yeah.
Of course, yes.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Yeah.
we can do it.
So, like, it's a very strange story for me because my dad was an engineer, and then everybody thinks that that was what led me to come into it. But actually, I was hardly aware of architecture existed. So it's a funny story that there was a classmate of mine in my high school, not high school, basically seventh grade. So, so that same person's mom was basically an architect, and she used to take these NATA classes. So when I was in 12th, I think I was sure that I don't want to do science. And during that time, I think commerce was not that picked up, and like it was not booming at that time. So then I was just looking for other things, like let's go into gaming, let's do anything apart from science. But then that was the path ahead. But then suddenly I just came, we just had a get together, and then I just met this person, and he was like, I think you should just give the Nata exam, big deal, like what's going to happen. So then he's like, my mom will take classes for you, like it's 5 days, just come for it. You don't need to pay, you're my friend and things like that. So that happened. Okay, they just taught me how to draw in perspective. All these things were very new. So did that, then gave that, and then ended up there. So first 2 semesters went to BMS. It was damn weird. Like it was out of place because there were a lot of redos. They were like drawing lines. It's like I was like, oh, this is. I just got myself worse than science. Like this is bad. and then after that, I think from third semester, I think started picking up. Then there were a lot of mentors who came in as faculty. And then one of the biggest people were when I did my internship in the fifth year was Sagar Shetty, I think, living form. So he basically taught a lot of discipline to me. And then from there, I think it's been a long journey. It's just after that, I was with Girish for a bit.
Yeah.
And then went to Delhi, worked with a firm which was slightly more into timber and experimental, like more into material, like more in terms of how different materials fuse. That was basically Saurabh, which was Studio Autonom. And then after all of that, I think suddenly Manjunath just came once for a site visit in Delhi. He's like, I think you should just come and learn structures from me. Like, it's very important. And then, and then I just decided, okay, let me do it for 1 year, and then I think I'll go plan to do masters. And then it just went for 4 years without knowing how the time passed. And then that was a rigorous journey. I think that was what got me to this point where all of this experimental kind of approach of different kinds of system and different kinds of material and how you can play with the structure itself, and that becomes like the main, like at least for me, I think like that becomes the framework for architecture itself. So and then it was masters because that was one thing which I just felt that I wanted to know alternative tools or alternative ways of looking at the same thing. And that was one of the courses which was completely different, I think, apart from another one which was in Germany called Stuttgart, if you're aware, but that was slightly more technical and engineering based. But this was slightly a shorter program, and they also had a larger reach. So that was that, and then yeah, I think, and then after that,
Sort
just
of
started.
stumbled upon architecture, but stuck it out anyway. That's
Yeah, so
interesting.
it just took time, yes.
But what I think is incredible is that I don't know if this is a format that's common in Sri Lanka, and I was discussing this with Diane earlier, but you've practiced with the firm for 10 years, and you are now in the process. After 10 years, you started doing your own body of work. And I find so often in India with people, I don't know if both of you would agree, but very young people seem to jump into practice. And is it common in Sri Lanka that people would normally practice for long durations, like 10 years, 15 years with somebody else before they began? Is there a hesitation there before they begin, or is it unique to you and your journey?
I would say it's quite common
To practice that
to
long?
practice. Yes, to practice under or to learn the craft under someone. So the two of us, we studied at this college called City School of Architecture. It was called the Colombo School of Architecture when I was there, and it was a part-time course. So from the second year onwards, we started work. So from the second year onwards, we would interact with the clients, we would interact with the contractors, suppliers, and by by the time you get your license, you're well into the industry. You know how difficult it is. Maybe that's probably why we wanted to stay in office a little bit longer, because we know exactly how difficult it is.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
adds a certain gravitas to the way you practice as well, which very evident in your work.
Yeah, and I suppose the risk factor as well, because what we went through the past couple of years, because of the economic crisis, it's not very easy to get projects all the time. So this the degree of inconsistency and the degree of uh, that risk factor also probably plays a role. It's always nice to know that you get
You're
paid at the end of
associated through
the month, right? So a couple of factors, but it's very common. It is very common. I don't know if it goes on for 15 years, but probably a good more than 5 years for sure. More than 5 years, anything between 5 to 10 years, I would say.
That's reassuring because it's a very old system of practice where you apprentice or it's like a master craft and you learn it for several years before you can even think
Yeah.
to begin something of your own. And it's
Yes.
so common today that people, it's incredible that they have the courage to begin, but there's always so much more that I think time within the practice lends
True.
to.
It's two models of, I suppose,
yeah.
doing it. But back in Sri Lanka, I think we are a little old school, so we kind of, work under someone for some a little duration of time.
Yeah.
It's usually how it is, right? Yeah.
But I think I want to add to that. A lot of people in Sri Lanka don't really know what an architect does as well.
Okay.
Not architects, but
Sure. The common man.
Yeah. Sometimes they think that it's not worth hiring an architect, that they can do it themselves. It takes a long time for people to start trusting you.
That's prevalent here too. But of course, I mean, because of population and the percentages, then.
They'll say, oh, no need, we can do it ourselves, that sort of thing.
it's really a matter of getting your seal. That's all they want to get the approval.
Yeah.
After that,
Okay.
they don't really want you. That's the case. That's very common in Sri Lanka.
Okay.
So projects like Folk Wall and also Elasticity, where a lot of your, especially your project, is a lot of 1:1 prototyping, and it's very heavily material-led experimentation. So we wanted to know how exactly can this smaller scale projects be into a larger scale, into like probably schools or say IT parks, of how you use computational and even robotic fabrication. How can this be used in a much more larger scale? And how can it, especially in terms of how cities like Bangalore, where it is so rapidly moving and construction is fast paced, how can this kind of technology be used into present time?
So I think Hook Park was about little system building. So datum is sort of this sort of cell that you have created. That cell can be then repeated to do something that's 10-meter long, but then also something that might be 100-meter long. Hook Park is also a sort of a different context, that you have the timber right there and you can collect it, and that's what, like, a lot of times it will be us who will just be going and nudging the forester, okay, we need that tree, and then you'll get the tree. In a problem in India would be to source all of that material to do stuff like that. But I think all the skills that you have picked up, they are sort of transferable to sort of any ways of making. It might be then steel, it might be maybe still dimensional timber, but it's worth doing something like Hook in India too, because there's still so much learning. Like, even to just reference on a non-regular sort of piece of timber, it's a really difficult task to sort of do it and to learn how to do it. And I think a lot of those techniques were to sort of just sharpen your brain. It's like when you do math,
Yeah.
you probably don't need anything beyond, I think, algebra, but you still learn it and then you can do it. I think a lot of the work that we did was like that.
Yes.
Someday it will come back to you. But I think it's very possible. I think timber in general, as a material, has been picking up in India, and it is incredibly impressive, the things you can do with it. And I think they're still figuring it out. But yeah.
So there is a potential for it to be used. Abhijit, so your comment.
So the only thing that I felt about computation is it's like a very vast domain to understand it and to grasp its scale, because it's something which is completely digital and it's something that you just plug in and plug out and you exactly don't know where you are or what you're using it for. So if you're looking at rapid growth of cities and buildings, like I don't know how good of a tool it would be in terms of building a building, but like in my perspective, it would be much more useful if you're looking at a master planning level way where you're trying to systemize approaches, because that time it has a very strong hold in terms of understanding the growth patterns. Like what ArcGIS does is something which is accessible to everybody, but what computation does to you, or gives you, like, it's basically like an open source engine. So you could actually put in the parameters that you want, and you can make it flexible, which could grow over a period of time. So because relevant, like with the relevant time and the market around, like with AI and a lot of other things, it also gives you an upper hand in terms of how efficient it can be as a working module, and it also is completely related with scale. So it's about, you can't use computation for a very small thing because you would just waste time doing something which is, yeah, like, it's about how much you systemize and how do you multiply. And do you want to multiply the same thing again and again? Then you don't need computation. Would you want it to change and make it generative? Then you would go for something like that. So yeah, so that is something that I feel, but yeah, there might be a different.
Just to follow up to that, the idea of drawing for us is very big in architecture, and drawing by hand. And there's something like Glenn Murcutt repeats at the masterclass, and I think he repeats it several times. And what he says is the verb to draw is to reveal, and to reveal is to bring out, and to bring out is to begin to know and understand. And that is the process of discovery. But with a computer, you arrive at the end without comprehending the meaning of that end. And when you're dealing with computation, and especially both of you and the experiments that you've done with materials, the natural materials, the rattan, and also with timber and with mud. But do you think that the computer then dictates a lot of the product and takes away that process of what happens by hand, and that hesitation that comes, and that pause that allows you to discover? Do you think that?
No, so it's again based on how you use it. So if you're using it as a tool, then it's something that helps you to achieve that precision. So it's the same thing. Like what a craftsman used to do with his hand.
Yeah.
You're basically automizing it because you're using it to replicate and you're scaling it. If you're doing a single unit or a piece of craft, then I would still talk about doing it with hand. And so the first, what do you say, the first interface that you have with anything, like I still believe that it has to be handmade for you to understand the material and things like that. Like all these tools only help in terms of repeating it efficiently where you do not require a person.
Exactly. Yeah.
So that's where all of this comes in.
So then very much it is that once you've created that, we're talking about this idea of input the jig. And then the jig allows someone who's never worked with timber
Correct,
to
correct.
create the same thing.
Yes.
Which then takes away the connection of maker and the making.
No, so I mean, it takes away for one component. There are still 10 other components that need to
But
be
if it's fed into a jig, then what happens to that entire process where you might want to, the person who does not have any understanding or knowledge of the material that they're working with, and they're only using the pre-computed software, what you've put into the jig, and how that changes the way that they might, because they have no understanding of the material. They're so far removed from what they're working with. So now how do you?
No, so I think even to use the jig, somebody will have to sort of guide you. But it's the idea of like, so when you are, let's say, producing, let's say, products, you need to figure out how to not do the task once, but like 100 times with the same precision. And jigs helps you do that. And that's what somebody probably who's more experienced and does it already, he will be able to set up jigs which are not done through the ways we have done.
Yeah, but that disconnects you from the material and drawing out the qualities of the material, like for,
I just have one thing. So, like for example, like if you're talking about rattan, right? So even if you saw the whole thing, so there were 21 of us building the thing, and none of us knew what rattan was. Like how does it perform, or how does it, like in the sense that what are its qualities, like how does it bend, what is the bending properties of these things. So each person is involved manually in terms of understanding how the natural material works, and there are a lot of tests that are being conducted for which you're using these tools to understand, go deeper into the material itself, but every single person is actually experiencing it firsthand. And then once you understand what you want to basically build,
Yeah, but does the computer make that understanding for you, or is it something that you understand through working with the material?
No, it's still
Is
through
really the
working. It's
question.
still working. Yeah, because the things that you're inputting into a system
Because
is
the
again,
forms then are then determined very much in a parametric nature,
yeah.
as opposed to what a human bending that same piece would be able to achieve.
So those the simulations that I showed are
Yeah.
pure physics based, which have the properties. So even if you would bend it, it would bend in the same way. So the bending properties are the same. So it's calibrated for it to take the properties for its bending. So you're just using it to basically make it efficient over a period of time. But yeah, but rather than that, I think like it's a very thin line. Like I don't know how it would. Like I understand what you're saying, but
Because
in
it
the sense,
almost
yeah,
becomes like a modular thing which just replicates, and then the limitation of, actually then being an author there and discovering something that you might not expect to discover, which happens very, very intuitively when you're drawing by hand or when you're building on a site and you're responding to, let's say, a bunch of trees that are on site, and then you have to move around that, versus something that you've has been preconceived by software and that you have only worked on in infinite space. Don't you feel like there's a bit of a disjunction there between, using natural materials in a,
there is a disconnect, but it's a very thin line of how you would use it to benefit what you're wanting to do. But I don't think that is the like I don't think computation is you need to start with it. Like that should not be the medium for you to design, but it should become a tool for you to accentuate or make the design more efficient over a period of time. So yeah,
absolutely.
because that's what all of the experiments and things that we did was started from there. But yeah, like,
Yeah.
it's also about scale. So it's scalability.
Also, I think it's worth it's worth thinking about, like, even through digital technology, there are new forms of this whole new vocabulary of objects that might come out.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's what, so no one is taking away anything from hand. And actually,
That you take away.
yes, but it's something new that is being developed. That's what, like, the kind of stuff Bernard Kashe would have done is very different from anything that would have existed before technology had come in. But you still have somebody like Alison Cotter who will be carving the piece of timber by hand, and both have sort of their merit. And but that's what, like,
That
the
wasn't quite what I was trying. Maybe this is not. Not that there's a merit or demerit, but that connect of working with a natural material with your hands versus working on a natural material through a computer was just the just the distinction that I was trying to.
Contribute here, sorry, because I'm from essentially we manufacture products, right? And I think what happens is your creative process evolves with the introduction of technology, and tools obviously have advanced. From letting you work with your hands to now obviously working on a computer. So I think that essentially overall contributes to how you would create new products or new processes. So I think you learn to work with the additions of these things as opposed to them, I think, maybe having an impact in any other sort of way, or maybe having a negative impact on how you would view materials and how you would process material.
I wouldn't think that it would be a negative impact, just the distancing of self.
I get that. And I think also the creative process is so personal, right? So I think it depends on how much one would adapt to technology and how one would use it, I think, is a personal choice. So, like, you would still have people who would prefer to work with their hands and experiment and ideate with their hands. And you would have people who are, for me, I consider myself not very technologically comfortable. So if I were to get into processes, for me, it would be a very visual, visceral process of working with my hands. But there are people within my organization who prefer working in other ways.
Oh, absolutely. That is a personal preference. But I think when Glenn Murcutt says this, when he says that the computer helps you arrive at an end before you comprehend the meaning of that end, I think that is what I'm trying to highlight here. And I was wondering if they'd like to comment on that particular portion of it. Absolutely, technology aids. I was just wondering if they had, an interesting perspective that still allowed that you discover this end with technology as you go about. Yeah.
I think the end is subjective, no, because it depends on how far you want to go with it.
True.
Yes.
Yeah.
With that, we'd like to open the questions to the audience. If anyone's got any
Also,
questions.
how do you go about selecting material then?
So all of the experiments, at least with mud,
Mhm.
like if you, I don't know, this video was very short, but even with loam, like there are different constant, like there were different compositions to it. So all of that was tested by hand. Like none of it went into the software. So like in terms of the basic tests that are required for like the what do you say, like there is a cigar test, there is a drop test, there are different things by which you understand what is it stable, can it take the load, can it take all of these things. So then you're still in a one-on-one contact with the material to understand what it is and what is going into that composition. So where technology comes into a picture, like into the whole aspect, is that you basically do the same process where you create cubes, you take it to completion test, you understand what is load testing, you get the thing. After that, so there is a particular way of creating rammed earth, for example. Like this is just an example case scenario. So if there is, for example, if there's 350 mm or 450 mm is a natural standard of what you need to do on-site ramming, and that's the thickness that you have with respect to the width to the length to the height ratio. Technology only helps it to improve in terms of if you would want to make it thinner or panelize it. So that's when you start calibrating it using a software to just understand its behavior. So what is the thickness? So instead of actually making it multiple times, so that is something where you understand the material but progressing with technology to make it more efficient, which is taking it to the end.
Yeah.
Like yeah.
So would you say that's where the authorship lies, that you get to choose the material that you work with, and the computer and the computation that you do then helps you bridge
Yeah,
or
I would
define your selection process?
yeah, I think so, because that at least makes it like, at least in my perspective, makes the process more faster where you're understanding multiple variations of the same thing
Materials.
to understand its failure points
Yeah.
and understanding how fast you can
Yeah.
manipulate these things because of how it's like how the surroundings are moving today.
And ease of means.
Yeah, because otherwise you're going to spend a lot of time and energy and money and a lot of labors, and will they be ready to test so many times for you? So yeah, so that was the main
Yeah.
bigger yeah.
If anyone would like to ask a question.
We'd love for you to interact with the presenters and moderators. So please feel free to share questions. Not a very formal format. Yeah, thank you, Sonakshi, for jumping in. No worries, for sure.
My question is aimed at Darshana. With regards to the principles that you or guidelines that you had shown at the beginning of your presentation that you would like to follow when you work on projects, any stories you can share where you've had some conflicts with clients regarding this and how you negotiated it? Just any things.
Yes. So, like I said, we can't adopt all of those, those guidelines in all of the projects. I mean, like for instance, recently there was one project where we had designed the entire house around this beautiful tamarind tree, and due to the error of the survey that was done after we did the setting out, it was quite unfortunate. The tamarind tree was right in the middle of a column. So there was absolutely no way. I actually pleaded with the clients to allow me to change the design at that point, but it was too far down the line, so we had to cut the tree. That was very emotional day for us because it was a very old tamarind tree, and it was hosting a lot of butterflies. It was a host plant for a lot of butterflies, and we just it's an absolute crime to cut it. But we had absolutely no choice but to do it. So it's not. It's definitely we can't. I don't think we have followed all those guidelines for each of our projects, but we try to. We try to somehow make sure to be as sensitive as possible, and we don't. Like I said, we don't really try to push our uh, architectural narratives or our aesthetics on clients. We because if you look at those images, the four houses I showed before my house, none of them look alike because they all were based on what the clients really wanted to do. I believe that it's our job to somehow do it properly, do it creatively for them. Uh, so yes, so to answer your question, no, not always. It's not easy. It's not easy, but we try to manage as best as we can.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My question again is to Darshana. So the courtyard that you showed us in your house, right? So whenever we think of a courtyard, it is always open. In even like the great masters that we study, there's always a open courtyard where it's a space where you use it, you walk around. So the courtyard that you have created has a lot of landscape, and it is not like an open space, right? So what was what made you take that decision of still keeping that courtyard as an object and not like a space that you just run around?
Trees. To add as many trees as possible. It's really this very. You can call it a very superficial approach, but it's this visual need to create that little bit of forest for ourselves, right? But we did have a lot of trees, as I mentioned. But sometimes we do talk about this, whether we should have maybe created a small empty patch so that we can at least go into the garden. We do go into the garden, not that we don't, even as it is. But yes, you're right. Maybe in the future we might clear out a small patch, and then maybe it'll be paved with stone or something like that, and we might actually start to. Okay. The at the moment we don't have the need. We like it as it is. We like it, especially now. Those pictures that I showed were taken about 2 weeks ago. So this is the hottest time of the year. Most of the canopies were almost, they were quite, the leaves have fallen, and the undergrowth wasn't as green. So if you take the same shots maybe in November, it'll look very lush, and then the canopies would be much thicker, so the amount of light that comes down is a little less. And during I love the house when it rains, and she hates the house when it rains because all the corridors get wet. I absolutely love it because when you're in the middle of a heavy rain, it really feels like you're in the middle of the forest. It does. So, for us at the moment, we don't have that need, but I don't have a problem making a little patch of. We don't need it. We don't need it at the moment, and so because of so there's this one wall we have right next to our dining area. I water that wall all the time because there's lovely moss growing on it for one thing, and we found that when we water that wall, the entire house becomes cooler, right? It's probably, I don't know, evaporative cooling, I suppose. So adding a little, so when you have more trees, and we have this lovely irrigation system that keeps the plants and the earth moist all the time. Because of that, we feel, I would say, almost a 2 to 3 degree difference in temperature as soon as you walk into the house from outside. You really feel it. So I don't think we want to lose that at the moment. So, but you're right. If you have the need to maybe use that space, we can do it. Not that we can't. And in most of the houses that we do, courtyards are usable spaces. They're never jungles like this because no one would want to do it. Whereas what we personally wanted was a little bit of a forest in the middle. I hope that answers your question.
It was just whatever you've done is very nice.
Thank you.
It was just a random thought.
Some might think that it's a wastage of space. We were told that. In fact, from some of the visitors come when they come, they said, "Are you wasting space?" What else do you? I mean, what are you going to do when you walk into that garden? It's much better to have more greenery than more space because we have enough space, around the verandas and in the spaces that we have created. And I don't have any pictures of the roof terrace. The roof terrace is completely covered with vegetation. So because of that, I would say almost 85%, 85 to 90% of our footprint is all green. So if you look at it from the top, you won't see the house at all. So when you go to the top, I go, she doesn't, because because we don't have a staircase to go. We have to use a ladder to go up. It's really the nicest part of the house because it's very green on top because you're at the canopy level of most of the trees. So there we are actually thinking of doing a little sit out. Maybe that answers your question. Yes, true. Actually, the rooftop. Curiously, I said that we feel that most of our plants are on life support, right? Whereas the rooftop, what we did was we just filled up the soil and we just left it. So within a matter of 2 years, a few cycles of monsoon, it has really just grown as a wild garden now. So during the hot season, it dies, and then soon after about 2 weeks, you start seeing the purple wildflowers coming up, and it becomes green again. So that really made us question ourselves about the garden we have created in the middle, whether we have actually forcefully brought these plants that don't belong there. We love it; it looks good, but
That's
are
really
we?
interesting when architects build their own homes and start inhabiting them themselves,
Yeah.
and then your own feedback becomes. I think if you guys have any further questions, we're all just going to gather outside. There's going to be some mementos for everyone that I think people will be giving away now. And thank you all so much.